You've just received a phone call.
Someone paid me to kill you. If you want me to spare you, I'll give you 2 days to pay $5,000. If you inform the police or anybody, I will kill you.
You now have 2 choices: pay or die. It could be false, but if not, it means someone you know and trust wants you dead. Even if you think it's a con, do you want to take the chance? Especially if you've made what some might call questionable choices in life. Today, we're talking about death scams. The idea of death, even talking about it, is uncomfortable for most people, and that makes them easy prey for con artists. Within the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you about murder for hire, cryogenics, prepaid funeral scams, and of course what to do in the case of a zombie apocalypse. You'll also hear about resurrection scams, and before you ask, there will be no discussion of Viagra. That's for another episode. When we began, you heard a con artist threaten death to a person or their family. But what about real hits? Just asking around will put you on police radar, and it's likely you will soon meet an undercover officer who's happy to take the job.
I don't want to shoot him. I don't want to do it, because I will go to jail, and I'm not going to jail for this jerk.
If you're a hired killer, you have to be ready to provide custom services. This woman wanted her husband gone so she could get a new roommate. She also wanted the killer to do the job in the backyard, outside of the house.
Because it would be messy in the house.
Susan Williams was convicted of conspiracy for trying to hire a killer and was sentenced to a maximum of 8 1/3 to 25 years in prison. Deaths mean funerals, and there's a line of scammers urging a new client to pay in advance, knowing there's little chance the victim will later put a bad review on Yelp. In the case of prepaid funeral plans, scammers have taken the money years before anybody realizes what has happened. The FBI took notice of a Missouri firm, National Prearranged Services, Inc. The agency said the company allegedly ran a scam from 1992 to 2008 that targeted funeral homes, financial institutions that handled the policies, and state insurance guarantee associations.
They were defrauded as a family. And I think there is nothing more appalling than stealing from the elderly. There wouldn't have been a funeral home in this state except that policy, because there's no money there.
Marty Myers of Blue Springs was one of a small number of Missouri funeral directors that honored the policies anyway, despite the number of claims. An estimated 45,000 to 55,000 Missouri residents bought the pre-need packages, and they spent $2,000 to $10,000 each for them. And that doesn't include the policies the company bought from other funeral homes. But you wouldn't even be in this mess if you'd arranged a resurrection, and that's what cryogenics has to offer. It's simple. You die and your body, or just your head, is frozen and stored until whatever illness you had can be cured. No one has ever been frozen by a cryogenic method, then brought back to life. Even those doing the freezing aren't sure how it might be done, but they're hopeful that future scientists will figure it out. So is cryogenics a scam or a gamble? Ask me again in 1,000 years. Or you could ask Mike Hendricks now. In 2015, when he was a neuroscientist and assistant professor of biology at McGill University, he wrote an article for the MIT Technology Review entitled The False Science of Cryonics. I'll spare you all the verbiage about brain synapses and other such things and go straight to the bottom line. He says, quote, "While it might be theoretically possible to preserve these features in dead tissue, that certainly is not happening now. The technology to do so, let alone the ability to read the information back out of such a specimen, does not yet exist, even in principle. It's this purposeful conflagration of what's theoretically conceivable with whatever is practically possible that exploits people's vulnerability. Upon further review, I'm thinking it's more of a scam. If cold isn't your idea of how to spend eternity, cremation is an option. Here's some advice you might pass on to whoever is going to haul your ashes. First, you don't need a casket for a cremation. You may be required, however, to have a container. That's to protect workers when your body is moved from the funeral home to the crematorium. You can get one for about $600. If a funeral director tells you a casket is required, ask about a container so you aren't pushed into buying something that's unnecessary. In general, laws say your body needs to be in a container that's sturdy, leak-proof, combustible, and has no metal parts. State laws vary, but embalming is not necessary if the body is kept chilled, and cremation will take place within a few days. Now we're at the point where your loved one has joined the Grateful Dead, and one day a letter hits your mailbox. A book about your family history was written. Only a few copies remain. Would you like one? If you did receive that letter, it probably came from Halberts of Bath, Ohio. Gary Halbert was a marketing-driven guy who stumbled about until he discovered direct marketing. At the time, direct marketing was people buying things by mail based on advertising they'd seen and having those things delivered to their homes. Here's a clip from Gary's son that's part of a recorded interview with his mother.
The thing is, my pop was 100% about marketing. And if you knew him, and what that really meant was he didn't talk to you about things outside of marketing much. And if he talked to you about something, his angle was about marketing. Really, all these people spend this much money doing this kind of stuff, and how many come out to do it? You know, I mean, it'd be subjects he's not necessarily interested in, but he'd go right to the marketing angle. And he was like me. He was a bucket mouth. He just talked and talked and talked and loved to talk. So if you were close to him, you knew what was going on in his mind about marketing all the time. And if you were one of the people he trusted, he would tell you the things he was unwilling to tell other people's.
Before he went to jail for tax fraud, Gary Halbert's company produced a series of what he called family heritage books. He scammed a government agency out of a list of the most common surnames in America, then sent out letters to the most common names.
The only computer letters were really obvious. I mean, you could tell the minute that you saw a computer letter come to your house that it was, even though it said, "Dear Nancy," you know, it was like you knew that it was computer generated because the type looked different. So what he wanted to do was create these letters and say, "Dear Mr. Miller," and have a photocopied, and then you just send them to everybody named Miller.
That was Halbert's wife, Nancy. Round about 1995, the National Genealogical Society and the Federation of Genealogical Societies went to the Postal Service with a complaint about Halbert's marketing practices. The Postal Service issued a cease and desist order banning Halbert's company from using misleading marketing practices. There were many provisions to the order, and they included one that prevented the company from falsely representing, quote, that a solicitation for a surname-related product was sent by a relative of the solicitee, that a relative of the solicitee was involved in preparing a surname-related publication, or that a relative of the solicitee endorses a surname-related product. Halbert's surname books were also required to contain a warning label reading, "No direct genealogical connection to your family or your ancestry is implied or intended." Your loved one is now enjoying a long, peaceful dirt nap. You've avoided the funeral home scams and post-funeral scams. If you think you can let your guard down, my advice is not to. It'll come back to bite you.
The rise of zombies in movies and TV shows, well, pretty much everywhere in pop culture, has led many to believe that a zombie apocalypse could actually happen. So what if the day came when there was a showdown with the undead? Where would you go? What would you do? And what's your game plan for survival? But even more importantly, is there even a chance that we could survive?
Like a college graduate unable to find a job, you could find the dearly departed beating on your front door. That clip is from a video produced by the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory and the Department of Energy.
The Department of Energy and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory do not fund or perform research on zombies or zombie outbreaks.
These guys take all the fun out of zombies. Yes, that was a government video, but it uses zombies as a metaphor for the spread of viruses. Like we don't all have a PhD in that nowadays. And it's not like the comparison is unwarranted. Back in the merry old days of the 1918 flu epidemic, people were literally dying in the streets. The good folks from Lawrence Livermore began to explain statistical models from Cornell University about how things like viruses spread. The model was put into action and ran for the equivalent of 28 days.
The lighter areas have a high concentration of zombies, and the darker areas are areas where after 28 days there are no or very little zombies. So someone living in the San Francisco Bay Area, for example, it would be beneficial for them to escape to Nevada, where even a month into the outbreak, there's very few zombies there.
Finally, some data we can put to use. Jokes aside, death is a serious subject. These scams are run on people who are grieving, and their thinking isn't clear. There's no way I'd consider them a sucker. For whatever it's worth, my advice is to plan now and make arrangements that need to be made for when someone you love dies. Those clearly thought out plans won't take the pain away, but you'll be guided by someone you can trust. Yourself. People get taken by a scam or con because they want to believe they can become richer, smarter, or more attractive to a partner. But because they were the mark, they never realized they were being scammed. They never saw it coming. What you can believe in is that a new episode of Scams and Cons is coming in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening.